times when all we can do is cast ourselves on the forest floor and weep. Have you been through those times? Times when all we can do is cast ourselves on the forest floor and weep. There are times that call for the descent. The descent. There are times when we need to descend in order to rise. And it's a recognition that if we were just to start singing, start creating, start producing, start moving on with our lives, that it wouldn't be an honest reflection of where we're actually at, of what our alignment actually is with the universe at any given time. Because like we talked about last week, things build and we get caught in certain rhythms, and we get caught in these cycles of having to produce, and we get caught in these cycles of anxiousness. We feel a great deal of anxiousness over what's happening in the world, and that anxiousness over what's happening in the world becomes something that we feel like we have to rise to meet and produce more and more. Like, if I'm not agitated, then I'm not helping, right? That kind of thing. If I'm not anxious, I'm not helping. I've got to do something, I've got to do something, I've got to do something. And that forward momentum keeps us from being able to feel into the depths of where we're actually at, what the feeling actually is, right? So the cycle of descent and rise, descent and rise, descent and rise is embedded within nature all around us. It's embedded in the cycle of the seed. It's embedded in the cycle of the seasons. It's embedded in bodies, and it's embedded in myths. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. This cycle of descent and rise. And in our culture these days, and when I say our culture, because I know people come from different cultural backgrounds, but all of us are enough within modernity to be on Zoom together. So I'm going to say like our culture of modernity, right? Within modernity, we are not encouraged to slow down and feel the lament, right? We're not encouraged to slow down or to collapse, for example, like to let ourselves fall onto our knees. These are like somatics that we're not necessarily encouraged towards in our world. And there are cultures where traditions of lament and weeping and falling on one's face before the powers and falling on one's knees before the powers are, this is a valuable place, recognized as a valuable place within the culture. So keening, lamenting, right, from the Romani traditions to the Celtic Irish traditions to the ancient Greek traditions, find tradition after tradition that honored this part of the cycle. You could call it like the dark moon part of the cycle, the underworld part of the cycle. So if you're familiar with the story of Inanna, you know the story of Inanna and her descent. The story of Inanna and her descent. That story involves a letting go. It involves a letting go of her adornments at each of the gates to the underworld. She lets go, relinquishes, is stripped of each of her royal adornments in this great act of descent. And she tells her friend, her confidant, she tells her that when she is in the deepest part of the underworld, that she is to wail for her, she is to cry for her, she is to lament, she is to sing this song of lament. She is to fall to her knees, and she is to pound her chest, and she is to tear at her hair, and she is to ask why, 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 why? Why is it this way? Why is it this way? So this cycle of shedding, letting go, turning our voices in lament to this world that we long to rejoin with but feel separate from. This great question of why, this song of separation and reunion. This is so integral to the cycle. It's so integral to the cycle. And we have to check, because sometimes the mind, sometimes the cultural pressure wants to rush us through that process and say, okay, I shed a tear and now I'm getting on with producing and I'm getting on with saving the world, right? I'm getting on with all those things. I let myself shed one tear, and if we learn anything from the myths of descent and from the cultures that honor the place of the keener, it's that this part of the cycle must be honored too. This part of the cycle must be honored too. I heard somebody ask Martin Shaw, they were dealing with a really difficult situation in their lives. And they asked him what to do, and he said, get yourself by a large body of water. Get yourself to the shores of a large body of water. Because there the waters start to move. And there the tears might start to fall. There we might cast ourselves down on the seashore at last, on the forest floor at last, and let ourselves lament. So the descent into the depths, the descent is sung aloud as the mythic figures cry, I, 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 I.